All right, so we are once again talking about recording techniques, and I'm sure you've already figured out that we are talking specifically about using a center overhead microphone. Now, I'm sure most of you are already familiar with the common stereo placements for overheads. We've got Space Pair, XY, Glyn Johns, and all the other asymmetrical variants. And that is typically what I've used in the past. I'm most commonly using a spaced pair of overheads and then another pair of room mics panned hard left and right to just give me my stereo image of the entire drum set. But I've been noticing more and more when I look at behind the scenes images and interviews from really big budget recordings and from big budget engineers that they're using multiple pairs of room mics and often multiple pairs of overheads, or at least a stereo, like a spaced pair of overheads, and then also a center overhead. And this is something that I've done in the past, but I haven't done it in a while, but I was using a technique recently that I thought would work well with a center overhead. So I tried it and I just wanted to share my results with you. Now, what I've typically done to get a little more center information, because that's, I think, really what we're getting out of the center overhead microphone, is we've got this nice stereo spread from the spaced pair and the room mics, but sometimes if we're only relying on the close mics, on the kick and snare, there can be something kind of lacking where you're getting all of this lively sound from the sides, but you're not really getting any ambient center information. And that's what the center overhead is really going to bring back into the recording. And what I've done in the past to kind of get that sound is use a microphone in a placement that I've been calling the worst, W-U-R-S-T placement, much to my chagrin when I realized what it actually meant, but some people call that the fat mic placement. It's got a lot of different names. A lot of people use this placement basically where you are taking a microphone and putting it over the bass drum under the ride, facing the snare drum or somewhere thereabouts, and you get this cool kind of mid-rangey knock, and you get just some more life out of the kick and snare that you wouldn't necessarily get from the close mics. Now, in the past, I've found that to be sufficient to kind of get a little more life back into my center information and not have everything spread out to the sides. But recently, I wanted to start using a technique that I had kind of discovered on accident and then realized that people have been using it for a long time, which is this sort of over-the-shoulder thing that you're seeing. This is something that I did kind of on accident or out of necessity on a video shoot once, where the video I was shooting was more about the video, the visual aspect, rather than the recording, and I wanted to just kind of get the overhead mics out of the way. So I put them behind the drummer like this and expected it to sound really terrible because you don't hear people talking about over-the-shoulder microphones a lot, and I really liked how it sounded. And I figured that that's probably because I'm a drummer and I sit behind the kit most of the time, and this gives you a little more accurate of a representation of what the drummer would actually hear behind the kit, which to my ears usually sounds better. And of course I'm biased because that's where I'm sitting most of the time, but I really do think that you get more heft and more punch out of the drums from the back side of them here rather than on the front side or even directly over the top. So anyways, I sort of accidentally stumbled on that mic placement, and then I saw that Steve Albini does the same thing, and also with Coles 4038, so I figured, well, there you go. There's all the validation I need on that. So I've used this method every once in a while. In the past, I've had rooms that were kind of too small to use it, and even now in this room where I technically have enough room, these mics are kind of closer to the wall than they should be. These are bi-directional microphones, and so they're picking up sound that's coming in from behind the mics as well. So they're close enough to the wall that I probably shouldn't really be using them in this scenario, but here we are. But I knew that they were going to capture a lot of the punchy information from the drums, but I kind of still wanted an overall spread of the cymbals and the kit from above. So that's when I decided to add in a center overhead mic. And in today's test, I'm using a Slate ML2, which is a small diaphragm condenser that emulates other microphones. But yeah, that's my mic setup for today. Is really what we're focusing on are these over-the-shoulder kind of overheads, Coles 4038s, and then the Slate ML2 small diaphragm condenser overhead. So let me give you a demo, and I'm gonna record the close mics as well. I don't know if I'll put them in the demo or not, but I'll show you a few different configurations of using like just these mics, then all three, and then just the center overhead. And what you should be listening for is how the stereo image is affected and how all of that center information comes back into play when I'm using the center overhead in addition to these microphones. Now, you don't necessarily have to like it better or worse, it's just a different way to record and something that I thought would be appropriate for the recording scenario I was in last week. So there you go. I really think it helps flesh out the sound from this particular miking setup, but I also want to try using a more traditional spaced pair overhead situation with another center overhead. Now, if you want to try this technique, and something that I've been keeping my eye on is potential phase issues, which you will always have the more microphones that you use. So I'm making sure that the distance between the snare and all three of these mics is all exactly the same. So there are no phasing issues, or there shouldn't be, with the snare getting into these mics, but everything else around the kit, there's a little bit of a balancing act that you play whenever you start adding more microphones. So let me know what you think. Tell me if you have any experience with this sort of setup, but I hope you got something out of this video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.